Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you to the patrons who help make this show possible on a daily basis with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. Alright, so this is our deep dive related to Into the Breach, which is episode 13 from season 3 of The Bad Batch. And as we discussed in yesterday's episode, it ends in a rather unexpected way. The Bad Batch realizes that this is their one opportunity to figure out where Tantiss is and just has to go along for the ride with the science vessel. So it's just Crosshair and Wrecker and Hunter with Rampart in tow and Echo on the science vessel. That's all they've got for a group of people who could go to Tantiss and potentially rescue Omega, let alone the rest of the clones, and then all of the Force-sensitive kids that they don't even know about yet. We kind of expected them to be the cavalry that shows up at the end of the series with that final episode entitled The Cavalry Has Arrived, but it's not looking like they're the cavalry right now. So we'll get to who the cavalry could be, but first let's just talk about the problems that they are facing right now. Let's talk about Echo and his predicament first. So he had to stun a stormtrooper in order to finish turning off the proximity sensors so the Bad Batch could attach themselves to that science vessel. Unless Echo then kills that stormtrooper, takes his armor and ditches the body, he's going to get discovered. And we know he's not going to do that, so he's going to get discovered. Or at least the crew will be aware that they've brought a stowaway to Tantiss, and they will search high and low in the ship for him, and he will have found a way to get off the ship somehow, but that will only mean that the base will be on high alert because they know that a stowaway made it into the base. Now, because of the fact that Echo can plug into computers and do stuff, there's a chance that he could do something similar to what Crosshair did in season 2, which is just have a moment to briefly send out a broadcast about Tantiss to the galaxy, hoping somebody will hear it. But there's a couple of problems with that. Number one is that it would probably bring more Imperial support into play, which would make conquering the base or doing anything that much more difficult. And number two, it's only going to get Echo killed, right? I mean, they gassed Crosshair because they needed to experiment on him. I don't see why they would gas Echo and just save him, but I suppose it's possible. When we did the episode earlier this year trying to predict who might live and who might die at the end of this season of The Bad Batch, Echo was number 4 on my list. I had, who else did I have? I had Scorch, and I had Crosshair, and I had Hemlock above him. So yeah, I find it unlikely that Echo is going to be able to call for help from outside of the system. Then you have the Bad Batch, and they've got their own problems with that stolen Imperial shuttle attached to the science vessel. They're going to have to detach from it at some point before it gets to the base at Mount Tantiss. When they do it is key. If they do it too early, then they're going to get spotted on sensors somewhere. And if they do it too late, they're going to get spotted on sensors somewhere. So basically, they have to figure out a certain point of the flight path approach to Tantiss where they could drop off of the science vessel. They still won't be detected by its proximity sensors or anything, but they would have to be able to be low enough already that it would be very hard for sensors on Tantiss to detect them above the jungle tree lines. Once they're on the ground, maybe they can send an emergency signal to Rex or other parties. And again, we'll get to that momentarily. But yeah, that also seems like a bit of a difficult proposition, and one where somebody might detect the signal and it would give their position away and then cause Hemlock to freak out and call for reinforcements and whatnot. So yes, also seems like another dangerous situation. That means we're sending the Bad Batch into the base at Mount Tantiss as a result. Crosshair can show them where Omega and he escaped through the Lurkahound tunnels / pens, so that's a possibility. They have to get through the ray shields, but I'm sure they'll figure out something about that. And keep thinking about the name Flash Strike, which is the title of the upcoming episode, the penultimate episode of the series, and wondering, do they have lightning storms on Wayland? And what are the possibilities that some sort of lightning strike could hit the base and knock the power out, or that something like that could happen? I mean, it seems like it would have to be a huge natural event to make it possible for everything to go out. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see about that. And then you have the problem of Omega, which is that she may have figured out how to get out of the prison cells, but all she's been able to really figure out is how to get up to the laboratory where they are processing the blood samples. Once there, where's she going from there? I mean, she's going to need a data pad of some kind. Emery is not giving her any idea that she's going to be helpful just yet. Maybe this is where the M-Count kids discover their powers. They're trapped by Dr. Scalder, for example, and suddenly they are throwing her like a rag doll across the lab and knock her out, and they're able to grab her data pad and maybe sneak out somewhere else. But I don't think it's that simple, because although Omega has told these kids that she is committed to getting them out of the Mount Tantiss facility, she's also said that she is committed to getting all of her clone brothers out of that facility as well. And so, to my mind, when we hear about the cavalry arriving, I do wonder whether the clones that are being held prisoner on Tantiss might be that cavalry. I know I've talked about a couple of Andor inspirations with this season of The Bad Batch. Of course, I'm standing here doing this video with you now and not remembering a single one of them, but it does occur to me that there have been, and I don't think I'm hallucinating that, but this would be a similar kind of Andor-like situation where you turn the prisoners loose, and I'm sure they're not going to be necessarily chanting one way out, or anything like that, but yeah, they would be all in for an escape attempt that utterly destroys Tantiss. As far as help from the outside goes, well, again, it presumes that they're able to get a signal out, but Rex certainly is aware that Echo brought a shuttle to Borovio to pick up the Bad Batch and Rampart, and he may not necessarily know where they're going, but if he's able to figure it out somehow, or if somehow there's a tracker on that shuttle that Rex is able to access that we don't know about, then yes, Rex could lead the charge to come help at Mount Tantiss. He would bring other clones with him. You could imagine the Martez sisters coming along for this ride too. There's a part of me that wants to see Sid involved in this somehow, trying to make amends for the way that she did the Bad Batch wrong at the end of season 2. And of course, there's Phee Genoa and Fennec Shand. And yes, I would love to see Asajj Ventress show up in the middle of this too. She would certainly turn the tide for anything that's happening at Mount Tantiss. However, I don't know how she ends up at this thing, right? Like, there's just too many steps removed from her right now, unless she decides that she is actively paying attention to the situation and has been all along. Whatever happens, I do think we are in line for a couple more surprise cameos for all intents and purposes, right? Like, Rampart was a big surprise, but yeah, I don't think we're done just yet. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Who do you think is going to come back for the finale of The Bad Batch? What other characters have we seen that might surprise us by being involved in the finale somehow? If you're catching this on YouTube, comments are right there. Spotify, there's a Q&A section for the app, so check that out. And anywhere else you're catching this podcast, please head over to the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com and leave your comment there. Let me know what you think. And that is going to do it for this deep dive episode related to episode 13, Into the Breach, from season 3 of The Bad Batch. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Please consider leaving a rating or review if you haven't done so already. Please consider hitting a like or a follow or a subscribe or a join button on the app that you use to listen to the show or watch the show. Tell a friend, tell 2 friends, tell 10 Star Wars friends you know that this daily dose of joy exists for them. And please consider helping support me in getting this podcast out to the world every single day. You can do that and find more out about it at patreon.com/SW7x7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, as always. And may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.